Welcome back, everybody. It's Rodrigo Fonador with another episode of Asheville Real Estate News. And today we have a special treat. We are talking about a new topic on the podcast today. We're talking about pocket neighborhoods and got a fellow Latino or half Latino. So that's always exciting from a personal note. And so we're just going to talk about a little bit of the evolution of this new sort of development. I grew up in the city, so I'm kind of personally excited about it. Love the concept. Don't know much about it, so this is going to be a little bit of an educational trip for me as well. So without further ado, if you guys don't mind, help me welcome Mike Romero to the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned, it's always fun to talk to somebody else who's kind of mixed heritage.
Yeah.
And so before we even get into the real estate side of things, why don't you tell us a little bit about about who you are and how you got here to Asheville?
Sure. So I originally I was born in Miami, and I moved to Venezuela when I was 2, and so I lived there for 10 years, which is great. But it was kind of quirky because then I had to learn English when I got back into the States. So that made it real interesting. And then I spent most of my life in Miami. So my father's side of the family is all from Venezuela, and my mother's side of the family is all from Cuba.
Yeah.
And I've been fortunate. I've been able to visit both countries, and it was great. My dad came to Asheville about 24 years ago. And I came to visit him. He took a job here, and I came to visit, and just fell in love with the area. And obviously, if you know,
easy to do, right?
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
But if you know anything about Asheville, I mean, it was, it's. I see downtown now, and I see the growth, and it's so different than it was then.
Yeah.
It still has this incredible magic. It still has, the magic that it did when I was here for the first time, but with a lot more rooftop bars. Let's say that.
Yeah, so. No, that's so I got here in 2009, and I was going to Montreat College, and so I was out in Black Mountain, and then wasn't going to school anymore, and then I got a job downtown Asheville working at Curat as a server, and I remember the first time I showed up, I was like, holy cow, this place is like a little weird. Like, this is kind of sketchy. This is a really nice restaurant to be, like, I wouldn't have expected.
Yeah.
And then, 3 years later, it's like, oh, it fits right in. But it was the transformation, been fairly quick.
They got ahead of it. They pegged their timing really well, and the growth in this area
couldn't have been better.
It's been tremendous.
So you got here then 20-ish years ago?
So about 24 years ago,
okay.
I started to visit. I moved here permanently 13 years ago.
13 years, okay.
And interestingly enough, my career before I got into real estate was in the restaurant nightclub business. And when I started visiting my dad, I thought this is going to be the perfect place to start a restaurant. And I never, even though I'm part owner of a restaurant here in town now, I never did get around to opening up that restaurant because I started dabbling in real estate and just fell in love with the business, and it just kind of took off from there. So I've been here primarily 13 years, most of it in the Fairview area, where I've been representing a big project for a long time, and it's just been fun. It's been fun to watch the area grow. I always like to say I got into the business, right as the recession started to happen.
Yeah.
And I got into the business because I thought I was going to get rich, and it turned out not to be so.
2007's a tough time to get into real estate.
That was tough. But it taught me a lot of lessons, and I was able to really understand the business from the inside. And then I didn't know any better, right? So I just worked, and I think the difference, I always say it, between some of the guys that maybe are getting into the business now, maybe the past 2 or 3 years, versus the guys that got in it when it was really tough, is the fact that we just have a different work mentality because we had to work so much harder for the deal, to where the market has been really good now for a while. So it's been easier. It's never easy, but easier for sure.
No, I can relate to that. So I got into real estate 2012, 2013, and it's been an upswing the whole time. And in the back of my head, I'm always like, man, I hope everything I'm doing is real, because you just don't know.
You're one of those guys.
Yeah,
you're one of those guys.
Because that's always the thing, is am I actually doing something good, or is it just coincidence of the market? I think that that internal battle I don't know, that voice, I have to quiet it sometimes and just be like, no, trust the process and keep going.
Well, it's a rewarding business. What I tell people is that this is a business that gives you back. So if you put into the business, you work this business is going to give you back. And so a lot of it is very dependent, obviously, on what the market is doing. Yeah. So, if you keep this sort of real hard, steady workflow the entire time, it's always going to pay off. If you take your foot off the gas, when it's slow, then you're just not really going to see any business. So a lot of the agents that have been in town for a long time, some of the newer agents that know that I know some of these guys, they'll say, well, what's their magic? And I'm like, well, they understand their business really well, and they're not afraid to reinvent themselves when the market fluctuates. They're willing to work hard the entire time, and so they don't slow down. And I think a lot of it, as long as you keep that up, during what I think is going to come here in the next couple of years, which is really more, we're going to see the market stabilize a little bit more.
Leveling off.
I don't know that we're in for anything like 2007 for sure. But even now, I've been seeing it for the past 12 months. I've been talking to a lot of the builders that come to me for advice, and I've said, listen, the market has seen a slowdown. You don't want to have as many specs out on the market as what you've had before, because it's a combination of things, right? So we have a lot more builders now. Everybody's a builder,
right?
So now everybody's building. So we do have more inventory than we had before. We still have a good amount of buyers, but they just have more options. So the more options in combination with the little bit of higher interest rates, it does give the market pause. And so
slowing down a little bit, right?
A little bit, yeah.
So curious, I'm getting started-ish. I still feel like I'm getting started every day. But, you've been in it So almost 12 years?
12 years.
12 years, yeah.
12 years, yeah.
Biggest thing of wisdom that you would pass on to somebody who's been in it half as long?
Yeah, I get that question a lot.
Yeah.
So I talk about finding your sandbox, right? So find your sandbox. Find the place where you like to play the most and play there. I think what happens, and new agents and people that get into the business are willing to do whatever, right? And so, I did. When I first got into business, I was going to be this, $1 million agent. All I was going to do was sell $1 million houses. And my first sale was a mobile home to a Colombian lady. Yeah. And she, who didn't speak a lot of English. She wanted to buy it for, so she can have something for her daughter. And it was very eye-opening from all perspectives. I realized how hard the business was. And then I also realized that I just had to do whatever it took in order to get that paycheck.
Right.
So it took me a little while to sort of find my niche, find what I like doing the most. And since I found that's all I do. When you're newer, you're kind of just all over the place. I think it's just finding what you're really good at and honing in on that. There's an agent that I talk about that and I won't mention any names, but she's very she sells a lot of real estate in Biltmore Forest. Yeah. And people always, the question always comes up, what makes her so good? And I always kind of laugh because I know her, and I always say, she could probably point to any of those houses and tell you what the guest bathroom wallpaper looks like. She knows her market better than anybody else. So that is kind of where she's honing her skills. She goes to the club there. Those are her friends. She's made that her business and her sandbox.
Yeah. No, I think, I appreciate that insight. So it's definitely, I've been going through that transition personally over the last, 18 months or so maybe, where I'd be doing a little bit of everything, kind of just and then been over the last, 18 months to 2 years, it's been okay, focusing in on what's my bread and butter and do that and just focus on making that even better.
Yeah. Patience. Just keep
always,
doing,
right?
Yeah. Keep doing what you're doing because it does that consistency. Yeah. Young guys, I'm not quite as young as you are, but young guys have what some of us, if I've been already in the business, for 12 years, I don't have those additional 12 years.
Right.
So I tell people that are starting out, if you really do love this business, it's a business that will pay you back. You just got to dedicate the time to it.
No doubt. So you're talking about niches. What's your niche? And then that'll kind of lead us into everything else and kind of some big news on your end, right?
Yeah, so, absolutely.
Yeah, kind of just take it from there.
Yeah. So as I was saying before, I started in real estate, and like everybody else, I went and got my license, and there was something about development and construction that just always, for whatever reason, just always had my attention. And I actually went to AB Tech and took a class in construction management. Don't ask me why; I have no idea. I just kind of thought that
intuition.
Intuition, I guess. And it was great. It was really neat to talk to other builders, talk to people that were in the industry. And at the beginning, I didn't have a whole lot to do, so I hung out in the office a lot, right? I figured somebody's going to throw a deal my way one of these days. And you know, I kind of was working through some deals, making some relationships. And sure enough, there was an agent who represented a developer, and she was having a real hard time with this particular developer. And she came to me for advice. And we chatted for a little bit, and she went back and talked to the developer, and then came back and said, hey, you know, what you told me to say, you know, that worked. You know, I got him to do. And so we kind of kept that conversation going a little bit. And her business partner at the time decided to take on another project, and she came to me and said, hey, would you help me with this project? It's Poplar Ridge, which was out in South Asheville. And again, the market was just tanking. So there wasn't really much that I thought I could do, but I really wanted the experience. So I said to her, I'll give it a shot. And I said, let me talk to the developer, and I got into a conversation with the developer, and I told him, I said, look, you know, I don't know that there's a lot here that we can do, but I'm gonna do whatever I can, and I did. I created a website. I mean, this is back, you know, websites were not as prevalent.
Right.
I rented. I got a photographer that had a small plane. Rented the plane. We went up. Did all these aerial shots. And really just started to spend time in the development. Long story short, I didn't sell one lot. I made $0 in the development. But something important happened. I realized that that's where I belong. And so I switched companies. I worked for Beverly Hanks for a long time. So I switched to Beverly Hanks, and eventually I developed a relationship that led me to go into Southcliff. And Southcliff was a project that I've been representing for over 10 years, just almost 11 years, almost the entire length of my career. And sort of same thing, I came into it at a time in where the people that were representing the project were like, one was getting out of the business, and the other one was too smart. You know, she said, I'm going to go do something else because nobody's coming through the door.
Right.
So I was asked to just sit at the project and see if I can just, you know,
generate business.
Do something, right? And I sat there day in and day out, and I started to. It was a 400-acre property. I started to walk the trails, really get to know the lots, and really develop a relationship with the developer. And sure enough, the developer comes to me one day and says, "Well, we're going to sell the project." And I thought, well, here we go again. You know, I've made $0. This is not going to work. The new buyers and the new investment group that bought it, I developed a friendship with and a relationship with, and they asked me to stay, and it was great because then is what I'd like to, you know, call my success was part me spending time on the project and understanding the project really well. But also timing, kind of like you. I came, you know, the market really started to turn around, and the things that I started to put together really gave me the ability to grow the development and take it to the next level. The reality was that I was being paid to learn because I was learning a lot about the business, and because my ideas were working, it was easy to go back to the investment group and say, I need X dollars for this marketing campaign or X dollars for this marketing campaign. And so I did that. I did that for a long time, sold about $70 million worth of real estate with that group. The group that owns Southcliff purchased about $1 billion in real estate between 2007 and 2010. So they bought everything they could get their hands on.
They bought it right too.
They bought it right. That's correct. And so slowly but surely they've sold most of their assets. Southcliff was the only development they had here, and so I knew that you know my job's going to be over soon.
Right.
And so I spent the better part of about 2 years, because I knew the end was coming, trying to figure out what do I want to do next.
So you started this transition that we're going to talk about 2 years ago, give or take.
So the conversation with my new partner started about a year ago. In my head, the transition started 2 years ago because I needed to figure out what I was going to do next.
Just the recognition that you're like, man, I'm going to have to reinvent myself. Like what I've been doing, I'm not going to be able to do the same. Okay, cool. So let's talk about where you're at now then. Yeah. And what is this new transition and everything?
Yeah. So I've been on the board for Mountain Housing Opportunities for a long time. I was their board chair. I spent 6 years on the board. I rotated off for a year because you have to do that, and then I came back. Through that relationship, I met Chris and Jen Eller. Chris Eller owns Civil Design Concepts, which is an engineering firm here in town, and Jen Eller owns a company called Trillium Properties, and they're big supporters of Mountain Housing. Yeah. So we've been developing a relationship for a long time. And like everything else, we'd probably only see each other about once a year at the annual event. And we would always say, hey, we got to get together. That we got to get together turned into, hey, we got to work on a project together. And we started the conversation trying to figure out, okay, I like them. They like me. I like what they're doing because they have this Asheville pocket neighborhoods concept that they're developing that really piqued my interest. And so, the fact that the sort of the idea of not having to go work for a national company or represent a national company to actually represent somebody locally here that can have an impact here really grabbed my attention.
Yeah, no doubt.
And so the conversation started, well, how do we do that? And what does it look like? And moreover, hey, where do you guys need help? And the conversation quickly turned into, look, we have this concept of pocket neighborhoods, which Jen, my business partner, absolutely loves. And she said, it's a way for us to really be able to bring, more affordable housing to the market and develop in a way in where we think there's a segment of the buyers that are really interested in. And so as that conversation started and I never thought about that. Like it wasn't something, the last project, we're selling 1 acre lots, lots were selling for $300,000-$400,000. So this concept was essentially new to me. But as I drove through the city, I started to see what they were talking about. Coincidentally, I had a friend of mine who was going through a divorce, and he said, "You got to help me find a house." And I said, "Well, I don't do a lot of general brokerage." I said, "Maybe we'll." No, he said, "No, you got to help me." And I said, "All right, we'll do this, right?" So typical buyer, he wanted to look at everything, and he lived at the time in a 3,500 square foot house with a 3-car garage on an acre. And the more we looked, he kept saying, "No, this is too big." And we're talking about a guy who's in his 50s, has a child, and was very well within the sort of parameters of being in another house, maybe not quite 3,500 square feet, but something similar. And he kept saying, no, smaller. And we would look at a house, no, that's too big. And I finally set him aside. I was like, what is it that you want to do with your life? And he said, you know what, Mike, I just want to simplify my life. I just don't need all this stuff, man. I want to travel. I want to go out on the mountain bike. I want to be able to get out on a sidewalk and go to a restaurant. Yeah. And I thought, West Asheville. Right. West Asheville's for you. So we started looking at West Asheville. And sure enough, so he moved into a 1,500 square foot house with no garage.
So it's like half the size.
Yeah. And then a bunch of other houses around. And again, that woke me up to a new concept, and where when I was selling him that, or when he was buying that, and I was spending time in that house, I met the neighbors, and I thought, my gosh, all these people want the same thing. They're all looking for community. Right. And it's what I tell people all the time that people don't come out and buy granite countertops and stainless steel appliances and hardwood floors. They don't. That's what we advertise, right? As if we're in real estate, that's what those are the.
That's easy to put on paper, right?
That's exactly right. But people are really buying community. People are buying a feeling. Yeah. And so there's a big segment of the market that really loves the concept of just being able to be part of a community as opposed to part of a neighborhood. Right. And so these conversations with my business partner, Jen, really started to evolve. And the conversation turned into, hey, why don't you take half the real estate company and let's just you've got the marketing and sales ability. You can put the team around what we need for Asheville pocket neighborhoods, and help us build that. And that's kind of what it turned into. And it wasn't like the first conversation and the last conversation were so different. So it's almost like when you go buy a house, like what you first think you're going to buy, what you end up with is sometimes completely different. And so it was really neat. I started to more and more. And still today, I every day I wake up more and more invigorated with this concept that she loves so much, which is, to do pocket neighborhoods.
So let's talk about that really quickly. What is a pocket neighborhood? Yeah. Just if somebody's unfamiliar with the concept, how would you describe it?
So typically pocket neighborhoods, you're going to find them, they could be anywhere between, I say 10 to 15 homes, a cluster of homes. typically some sort of green space, and a lot of times they're closer to some sort of amenity, right? The number of homes I think is not as important as sort of what you develop, the sense of community that you develop. And so what I think to us is important is that we're creating a sense of community. Most of our buyers are going to be either millennials that are buying for the first time, so there's an affordability aspect there, or we're getting baby boomers that are looking to downsize. They've already had the big house. Interestingly enough, Jen talks a lot about, we get a lot of widows, we get a lot of people that, who are retirement age, who lost their spouse, and now they want to be able to be really close to their neighbor so that if something happens or if they want to socialize, they've got somebody nearby. And so, as I like to say, it's not for everybody, but there's a segment of this market that really looks for that. So typically what you'll find in most pocket neighborhoods, it's some sort of epicenter that gets the residents together.
So how is this different than from like townhomes communities?
Yeah.
Then that in my mind, I guess it seems like they're different. That's obviously right because it's not called the townhome community, but there's obviously some overlap, right? There isn't. I don't know.
No, there's definitely some overlap. It's definitely for what I would see. So when I was in Southcliff, we had both townhomes and single family.
Right.
And one of the last projects that I launched was this little project in Southcliff called Still Creek, and it's a cluster of 32 homes. And that land was originally supposed to be townhomes. As I talked to buyers and agents and I started to kind of survey people, it was interesting. People would say, I don't care if that wall is 10 feet away. I just don't want to have to, I don't want to have to share that wall with somebody.
Right.
I don't want to make noise or feel like I'm making noise and bothering them, and I don't want them making noise and bothering me. So the perception of space becomes important for the person that buys a single family. One of the big things for pocket neighborhoods is not really having front load garages, and a lot of times not having garages at all. So one of the things that we talk about is you see a lot of these neighborhoods and these beautiful neighborhoods.
Right.
You have these giant garages in front of the house. And what happens? You get home, you drive into your garage, you close the garage, and you go in the kitchen. You never wait to your neighbor.
Right.
You never. So that's one segment of it. And the other is they fill their garage with a ton of stuff, and that they just don't want to let go. And so we're trying to sort of help both of those sides. So we're telling people, listen, I have these conversations with baby boomers and retirees all the time. My joke is, get rid of your stuff. Your kids don't want it. Get rid of your stuff. Your kids don't, your furniture is not going to match their taste. And, you have that coffee table that Nanny gave you, when you were like 3 and you've held it all your life, and now you want Bobby to have it. Bobby doesn't want it.
No.
He just doesn't want it. He doesn't want to have to deal with it because it doesn't match his stuff, and he's not emotionally attached to it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I learned this the hard way. My mom passed away a few years ago, and all of the stuff that we had, we got rid of. The only thing that we kept in reality were the pictures.
Right.
Everything else, and her pictures and her books.
Yeah.
All which is of course all digital now, right? So so what happens is that these people that are coming here or that are retiring and they're thinking about downsizing. They unfortunately have seen a lot of them move twice. Right. They downsize and then they right size, because what happens is that they're having a hard time letting go of their stuff, of their things, and like my buddy, he wanted to simplify his life. A lot of the type of person that picks up a pocket neighborhood, they want to simplify their lives. They want to have their kayaks and their mountain bikes, and they want to, but the home is just a spot to kind of lay your head in. It doesn't become the epicenter of your entire life. You're not entertaining as much. You don't have kids that are running in and out of the house. So what are you really utilizing the space for?
Good, clean place to call home.
That's
to
exactly
you serve as a launching place for everything else that you're doing, right?
That's exactly right.
No, that's So I grew up in a big city. I like overall, I feel better when there's kind of closeness around me. So that the concept resonates with me a lot. So how are you guys providing this, or how do you roll these pocket neighborhoods out? Do you have any projects in the works? How does this, all come to fruition, I guess?
So we do. We've got a big project coming out of the ground, which I'm very excited to talk about. And essentially what what we do is that we partner up with a builder typically, and the builder brings the design to the table. The partners look at it and make decisions from there to make sure that it fits within our parameters. Okay. Finding the land here in Asheville, as you know, is not an easy. It's just not an easy thing. And I go to New York. I always end up going to New York at least once a year, and I love the concept of the brownstone. That you come out to the sidewalk and you're right in the city, right? And that's really great. We don't have a lot of that. We don't have a lot of that here. But kind of like New York, I see Asheville growing. And it's funny, I had this conversation earlier, as downtown Asheville almost being Manhattan. And then the rest of the areas like the Fairviews and Lesters and the, Weavervilles and Waynesvilles almost being like the boroughs, right? Yeah. And so, who would live in Brooklyn like 20 years ago? And now Brooklyn is a pretty great spot to be in, right? And that's what I'm seeing that the market, I've been saying it now for a couple of years. It's going to be the Weavervilles, the Waynesvilles, the Lesters, the Candlers, the Fairviews. Like, you're going to be able to go out towards those corridors where land is more affordable to be able to develop, to be able to build a house. And so the first thing that we do is we try to find as many pockets as we possibly can. So, like right now, we have 8 houses or 6 now in Oakley, and one of the developments, the partners bought a house, they rehabbed the house, and then they subdivided the lots, and it turned out great. I mean, the concept is amazing. I mean, you literally step out of your house and you've got the sidewalk right there. And then you have Biltmore Lake right nearby. There's a huge Target center right nearby, a Walmart center right nearby, 240 right nearby. So you really have quite a bit happening there. And so we try to find spaces in where you can get in and out of quickly. So there's a lot that goes into the original concept, into the actual buying of the land and what does it look like. And that's where Chris Eller and his experience with his company, they can really grab any piece of land and look at it and say, wow, this is what we can do. So it all starts with Chris, really. At the end of the day,
this piece works really well. Let's move forward. Not so much.
That's exactly right. So to talk a little bit about what we have going on now, so we're excited. We're getting ready to launch a project June 15th called Barkley Terrace, and it's going to be the first dog-centric community in Asheville. And so,
very cool.
Yeah.
What makes it dog-centric?
So we're going to have 2 dog parks, and the homes are actually going to be equipped with like doggy doors. They're cubbies for the cubby drawers so that you can have your bowls in there.
I've seen those.
Yeah. So it's going to be. So we're really excited, and I laugh now because I've got 2 kids and don't have a dog, even though everybody's convinced that by the time this project's over, I'm going to have a dog.
Well, I'll keep rooting for you not to have a dog. I don't know. I'm like, I love dogs. I'm like, I just can't imagine owning one. That would just be tough.
It's a lot of responsibility, and I've had them. My last dog was a bull mastiff.
Did you?
I mean, yeah. So I've had so I've gone now a good stretch without a dog, and so I'm like, you know what? I gotta lay back a little bit. But it's funny because what I hear a lot of the millennials talk about is, they're not shopping for their kids. They're shopping for their animals. They're shopping for their dogs. And typically, same thing. Typically, baby boomers, their kids are gone, and so they get a dog. And so we're really excited about this community. All the yards, all the homes are going to be cottage style homes from the standpoint that they're going to be on small lots, because one of the things that we get a lot is we don't want to have to maintain a bunch of yard. We don't want to have to cut the grass. We don't have to do any of that. So one of the neat things about the community is that all of the lots are going to be low maintenance lots. So you're going to have enough, obviously, for your dog to go. But when you want to take your dog and you want to exercise him, you can take him to one of the 2 dog parks. The location for us is really important because there's a field across the street that has sort of a circular gravel.
Oh, wow.
It's a soccer field, and it's got a circular gravel sort of runway there. You've got a walkway that we were told by Weaverville that's going to be connected. So you're exactly 1 mile from downtown Weaverville. So what's nice about it, it's same thing.
Super
Once
accessible,
once that walkway is done, you can literally come out of your front door and be in downtown, in 30 minutes and have a really nice walk.
Right.
And so Weaverville is a town that really, I think, can hold a community like this. And same thing, because you can go to almost any of those restaurants, sit outside with your dog. They bring you dog treats, the water bowl. Yeah. They really, they cater to that. And Asheville has turned out to be one of the top cities for dog lovers.
There's dogs everywhere. Yeah. It doesn't matter what you're doing for sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's really cool. So that breaks, you said June 15th.
So
does it break ground, or you guys have houses available?
So we will have houses available as of June 15th.
Wow.
So we are under construction on the first 5 houses.
Awesome.
So barkleyterrace.com is going to be the website.
Okay.
That's going to be ready actually in the next few days.
Well, by the time this comes out,
so
we'll link it up and everything. So
that'd
if
be
somebody's
great.
interested,
Yes.
they can go and visit that. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, and we'll have, pictures of how things are turning out. So we're really excited. And we have seen, we have just a small sign there, and people are the phone is ringing off the hook. People are like, what do you guys have going on? And once we start telling them about it, they're like, all right, put me down, because as soon as you guys have plans and pricing, I want to know what it's all about. Right. That's the other exciting part about it. I mean, we have houses that are going to start for $229,000.
Oh, wow.
So
as a new build, that's huge.
It's big. I mean, you don't find a lot of new construction in Asheville or in the in the Buncombe area for 200 and in the 200s for sure. And not to oversell the hardwood floors, granite countertops, and stainless steel appliances.
What?
Yeah, but you get those too. You get those too.
Very cool. Yeah.
So the standard packages are going to be phenomenal.
So how big are these houses then? Just
they're going to range.
Take, obviously.
Yeah, so they're going to range between 1,000 square feet and 1,500 square feet.
Yeah, so they're not small houses either.
Yeah, no, and I think about, for instance, I think about people like my brother, my youngest brother, who's in his early 30s, has a dog. He's got a German Shepherd, and he's in a relationship now, and they've been together. I think they recently moved in. Don't tell my parents. And
don't show the podcast.
Yeah, don't show the podcast to my parents. But I watch him. He's been working for a long time. Right. So and he's been renting this whole time, and he's been trying to figure out, how do I buy? I buy? And it's a perfect home for a person like that that's in their early 30s, are looking for the first place to buy. We have financing in place through some of our financing relationships. I mean, we could really get people in a house that, if you're young and you're in your early 30s, and you think to yourself, wow, I really trying to find a place where I can start. You can live in there, and given the market here, in the next 2-3 years, 4 years, 5 years, you sell that, you're going to have really nice equity. You can sell that, and if at that point then you need something bigger because you wanted to have more kids or what have you, but you have a place to start from, as opposed to be renting until the age of 35. That's right. So
wondering, are there any? I'm wondering if there's people out there, who are like, well, I don't know if it's a good fit for me. Like, what would you say is like, hey, if you fit these characteristics, you should look into this more, because you might really like pocket neighborhoods. Because I think there might be I don't want to live with people on top of me, right?
Sure.
You get that a lot. People are like, oh, Asheville's getting built up everywhere or whatever.
Yes.
So what's the part that makes that worth it?
Yeah, so I always say this, it's just not for everybody. You know, at the end of the day, and we know that. And so I think people that live in bigger cities, what happens is, a lot of time the mentality, I know this happened to me when I moved here. When I moved here, I said, I want a house with 10 acres. Yeah. And my friends were like, well, what are you going to do with 10 acres? And I said, well, I don't know. I just want 10 acres. Right. I just wanted the space. Now I live on 0.2 of an acre. And so it's definitely not for everybody. I understand there's people that they want, they want some elbow room, privacy for sure.
Or whatever.
Yeah. And I think that it does become tougher for the couples that have 3 kids to live in a 1,400, 1,500 square foot house with not a whole lot of space for the kids to run around in. Yeah. And so there's that segment of the market that I think sometimes it's better suited for that lot that's going to be 1/4 of an acre with a bigger yard, so the kids can kick the soccer ball.
This is the pre-kid and the post-kid, right?
That's exactly right. Those are the markets, and those are the people that we want to cater to.
Right.
The people that are getting started, I tell them all the time, I'm like, don't rent, because the guy that you're renting from, right, the guy that owns that building, he's sitting on the beach somewhere, smoking a cigar, having a nice drink, right, and you're paying you're paying his luxuries. So don't do that. Pay yourself first.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point that you bring up, because so I'm actually a huge believer in renting.
Are you really?
Yeah, I'm typically like, don't buy.
See, I am too, but rent. I've got rental property, so I'll rent it.
I have rental property. Obviously we have rental property too.
Yeah.
I always say is like, look, I think home ownership can be a really good piece of the puzzle. I always get concerned when people are like, oh, I'm buying a house just because that's what I think that's the next step. I'm like, man, that's a really big purchase to just walk blindly into, right? If you're doing it just because that's what you think you're supposed to do, Man, I don't know. Like, I feel like that's really for a big decision. You
Yeah.
shouldn't just do that because that's what you think you should be doing.
Yeah.
But,
No, and that's a great point. And it's interesting because I
Yeah.
had this couple. So I don't do a lot of general brokerage, and this couple was recommended
Mm-hmm.
to me from some friends.
Right.
So I took them on. The wife is taking a job here downtown. The husband works in IT.
Right.
They're selling their house in Indianapolis, and the Indianapolis market's completely different than here.
Yeah.
I mean, you could buy a really nice brand new house,
100,000,
right,
right?
for a fraction of the price. So they're like sticker shocked, and they're buying almost basically sight unseen. They've already been here. They know the areas, but the house that we picked that we just put an offer on this morning, they haven't physically seen. And my conversation with them has been, listen, it's okay to rent for a little while.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay for you to get here, rent for a year, which is what I did. Figure out where in town you want to be, and then do that. The reason why buying became important to me
Right.
was because, for instance, my grandmother, my mom's mom, who is in a home, she got Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And my brother and I laugh. We're like, she's going to outlast us both. But when she came to this country, she bought a house, right? And then she stayed in the house for 30 years, and she paid it off. And it became a big piece of her retirement because she had that money, was so she bought the house for $27,000,
Right.
and then so she sold it 50 years later, right?
Right.
And so the gain there is kind of what I talk about. It's definitely not. I think there is definitely an argument on both sides. I wouldn't say to people that if that's all you're going to do from an investment standpoint, then there's places where you can gain more money out of your down payment.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think, ish, right? So I think that there's just not a lot of people who are buying a house and then waiting until they're 60 to sell it.
Right.
And so,
right.
like, if that's your plan and you really think you're going to live there, then it is probably a really good idea to just buy.
Yeah.
But how many people when they're 20,
Right.
5, 30, 35 are really looking at this house and being like, well, yeah, I'll be here 30 years from now. Like, I don't think that's a huge segment of the population.
Yeah, it's something it's interesting because it's very much part of this country. I mean, in Europe and in our countries, like in Venezuela, Colombia, because financing laws are different.
It's insane. It's just
you got to come up with 30% down, for instance, and
if
so
you're lucky,
right? And so most people, so it's definitely very much part of the, has become very much part of the American the mentality where we're just that's what we're used to. But I will tell you and again, very market dependent, but the last house that I bought it, 4 years ago, and then I sold it 2 years later, and
huge spread, right?
Yeah, I mean, massive, right? And I thought to myself, because that's my argument with my friends that are financial advisors is how much diversification do I do when I'm really the real estate guy, and I understand that better than anything else. And so when the spreads are good, but most people don't go into buying real estate like I go into buying. Whenever I buy a house, I've got an end game. I know what the exit strategy is.
You got that unfair advantage, quote unquote, of like you love it and you understand it. So I'll say one last thing, but I just think like you shared that story, right? It is market dependent because if you'd have bought a house in 2005, 4 years later, that's 2009. In 2005, like nobody was. Very few people really felt like anything weird was going on.
Right.
And then the other thing is I work with a lot of people who, when we go buy a house, I don't know if I'd say a lot. There's a good portion of people that we talk to that are selling because the cost of maintenance surprised them, caught them off guard.
Yes.
And so they had all these deferred maintenance that started adding up to the point where it's like, holy cow, like I need to sell now or this house is going to fall in on itself.
Right.
And I think people, it's not talked about enough. Like, owning a house costs money, not just your taxes and your insurance and stuff, but especially if you're owning it for 30 years, because that's like you've got some big improvements that are going to be coming down the line.
Oh yeah. So I had this conversation with my dad the other day. So my dream car, I always wanted to have a Range Rover.
Yeah.
I always wanted to have a Range Rover. When I was growing up, I always thought.
But you got that now, right?
And I have it now, right? And so, but I didn't calculate the gas and the maintenance on the Range Rover. Out of control.
Yeah.
I'm like, so was it just a car? So all to say is that you're right. I mean, sometimes we think, oh, it's just a purchase, but what is the upkeep, right? So every time I go to the dealership to get an oil change, it's like $1,000. I'm like, where's my money going? And so it's sort of calculating that is calculating that in for sure. And again with these pocket neighborhoods, with what we're trying to bring to the table is affordability. So affordability, so that we make it less expensive to get into the houses and less maintenance, right? So your utility bills are going to be less. You're not paying the yard guy to come in and mow this. So the maintenance aspect of it, I think does make it a popular product again for those two segments of the market.
You're describing, and I'm like, okay, like maybe I would buy something. Like I would be way more into
buying something like that. I brought a contract, so if you want to,
write it up.
I can sign you up.
Sounds good. No, awesome, man. I don't know. Do you have any like closing thoughts for somebody who's looking to buy, thinking about buying, or maybe somebody who's listening, who's an agent, who's getting started, and you can be like, hey, like go get it.
So I'll talk on the agent side because I do talk to a lot of agents. I get hit up on Instagram by new people all the time.
Which, by the way, what's your handle so people can follow you?
So it's going to be Asheville Mike on Instagram, and follow me there, and you'll be able to kind of connect to the rest of my stuff from there. But I do get hit up a lot, and I had a good friend that was she was on the edge. What should I do? Yeah. And I knew that she would become a great agent, and she got her license recently. And what I tell people all the time is, what's great about this business is that, fortunately and unfortunately, it's not that difficult to get your license. Yeah. You just got to learn how to pass the test. You pass the test. The hard part is really getting out there. And that is what most people have a hard time with. And there's a lot of people that I think could be agents and they don't do it because they're afraid of taking that next step. And it's like everything else, man. Just try it. Just get out there, talk to people. I follow a lot of the people that everybody else follows, right? So I follow Ryan Serhant, who I think is hilarious. And he talks about when he first started, he talked to people at Starbucks. Right. And that's how he would get his buyers. And it's funny because I've been going to the same Starbucks on Charlotte Street for God knows how long. And the one guy that's been working the registers, he's a young guy. So I've known him forever. Yeah. And so the other day he actually said to me, he said, Mike, you're in real estate, right? And I said, yeah. He goes, I'm going to start looking for a house. You think you can help me? And I thought, I can't believe it. It's Starbucks. It really did happen. So it's just a lot of it is putting yourself out there. I think you get this, I'm sure, this podcast is a million times better than your first podcast. If you can live with the fact that you're just going to be really lousy at the beginning and you're okay with just getting better as time goes by, then you got to jump in and just make the mistakes and be lousy so that you can be great. Yeah, you got to put in the terrible effort so you can get the great result down the road. That's for sure. Exactly right. That's awesome, man. Well, I know we probably talked a little longer than I was anticipating, man. It was a great conversation. Yeah. So once again, thanks for joining us today. Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate that. And everybody else, if you guys enjoyed this conversation, please go ahead and iTunes or anywhere else you listen to your podcast and leave us a rating and a review. Yeah. And we'll see you guys all next week. Thank you.